Sometimes you just have to do what you can and live with it. Yesterday I finished The Dead Zone by Stephen King, and I like this one. This was pretty good. I mean, so far Stephen King has yet to write a book that I haven't enjoyed, but this is definitely one that's kind of in the middle for me. I do think how fans, or at least the fans I've interacted with, talk about this makes it a bit overrated, but it's still a very good novel, and I'll explain why. But before I get into all of that, both the pros and the cons, let me explain what's going on in this one. A teacher, John Smith, yes, that is his name, has an accident as a kid, and then he has another accident as an adult that puts him into a coma. And when he comes out of the coma, he has the shining. He has precognition. He has low-grade telepathy. So when he touches objects or touches people, he gets senses of things. And eventually, what happens here is he touches this man named Greg Stilson, who is this politician who is running for, not the president, but he's running for a U.S. Senate board or something like that. And he touches him, and he realizes this Greg guy is up to no good, and he realizes he has to stop him. And that is essentially what The Dead Zone is about, is John Smith using his powers of precognition to attempt to save people and eventually the world from doomsday. To begin with the positives, and I'll make my way into negatives, the premise here is just immediately great. I mean, I just gave it to you, but this is straight up just a Stephen King premise. Only Stephen King would be like, you know what would be great? Having just a ordinary guy get just put in a coma, and then just, now he has the shining, I guess, and oh boy, he has to stop a politician, and maybe there's an assassination involved. Who knows what's going to happen? It is so Stephen King, so immediately the premise is instantly interesting to me. And another thing that I really like about this novel that I was kind of surprised about because of the premise is how it develops its characters. This is both a positive and a criticism, and you'll understand why as I get into this. But you spend a lot of time with John Smith as a character. You kind of really sit with him as he goes through what is the recovery of a coma. He was in a coma for going on 5 years. From I think the age 25 to 28 or 29 or something like that. He's almost 30 by the end of this novel, and the struggles that he goes through recovering from this coma, from this lost time of missing out on the prime of his life, is very real. And you can really feel his struggle in this novel. So Stephen King knocks it out of the park in that way. And it is actually, it's interesting because this is both an incredibly depressing novel, but it has certain moments throughout it, I'm not going to spoil anything, but they're really, really sweet. And it feels rewarding to read those moments between the incredible thunderstorms that happen in this novel. Another thing I really like about this is the use of the powers here. It doesn't feel like The Shining or Carrie, where it's oh wow, they have a lot of power, but they don't know how to control it. This is more it's accidental, and it feels like a curse in all of his books, but this one really feels like a curse. Being able to tell the future feels like an awful gift from God in this one, and it hangs over this novel the entire time. And again, another thing I just have to add is the atmosphere here. I would not recommend reading this one if you're in a dour, depressing mood, because this is a depressing novel. It's quite sad. It's definitely more dour. It's not upbeat, but you really feel it in this one. The moods that John Smith feels, you feel in this. The atmosphere here created by those moods is very poignant, and it's very, very well written. The prose here is obviously just exactly what you expect from Stephen King at this point in his life. It's not quite as refined as his later work, but there are a lot of moments in here where it's yep, I can see how he refined this as an artist. I can see where he improved on this as an author. And that is something immensely rewarding about reading his work. Kind of, in line, but sometimes jumping forward, is you read something like 11/22/63, and then you look back on something like The Dead Zone, and you can be this is where he got this idea, this is how he developed characters from this book. this is how he does story now, etc. And it's very rewarding to read an author like Stephen King because, in my opinion, every era has something different. And because it has something different, I never feel like he hits his peak as an author. I know some people are like, yeah, his early books are the best. I don't disagree with that notion. I think a lot of his work is just as good as everything else. Like 11/22/63 came out in the 21st century, and it's his best novel, in my opinion. Under the Dome, 21st century novel, really great. So there is no plateau for an author like Stephen King. However, there is parts of the Dead Zone that just don't work for me. Again, this is like a classic Stephen King book. All the ingredients are there, but it doesn't quite make as good of a combination as maybe you would expect. And this could also just be personal taste. I'm not as big of a fan as his really early works, and this is like his fourth or fifth novel. As other people seem to be. I'm less hot on Salem's Lot, I'm less hot on The Shining, I'm less hot on, the really early books, but it doesn't quite deliver for me in every aspect. Yes, John Smith is a good protagonist to root for, but I felt like the antagonist here just didn't have enough time. Greg Stillson should be an incredible antagonist, and I think he is the blueprint for several great antagonists that come later in Stephen King's bibliography, but he's just not great in this one. You just don't see enough of him to really get a good sense of how evil he is. You get hints, he does some evil things, he's definitely a bad guy, and he will certainly remind you of certain outrageous politicians that we have to deal with here in the United States, including our president. There are those elements. So, contempt may vary, but for me, it just doesn't go far enough. It's actually interesting because a lot of people, they're always saying Stephen King writes too much, but for me, The Dead Zone, it feels like it needs another 100 pages to be fleshed out when it comes to the villain, when it comes to the development of the rest of the characters cast here. It just feels like we spend too much time with Smith by himself dealing with his issues, which is not a bad thing, but I would like to have seen just more from this novel, to be honest. I wanted this to be more of a small town horror, more in like to something like Under the Dome or It, and it just wasn't that. It's kind of more of just like a spooky thriller to a degree, and it just doesn't entirely work for me. The other characters that you're supposed to engage with, I just don't think that they get enough page time. So that for me really holds it back. Still, overall though, The Dead Zone is a very good novel. I actually think that this would be a very good introduction novel to people who are trying to get into Stephen King, because it has all of his classic elements, but it's a little bit more refined than something like Salem's Lot. You got the cool spooky powers, decent main character, an antagonist that is hateable, if not, the most hateable that he's ever created, and it's like 400 pages long, maybe 500. It's a very short novel by Stephen King standards. So I think this would be a very good introductory novel. Otherwise, though, I really liked it. I'd give it like 8.4, 8.5 out of 10, and I'm looking forward to more Stephen King novels in the future.